Today's daf we're going to be learning is daf Pei Gimel. It's the daf for the second day of Rosh Hashanah. We're going to start the 9th chapter at the top of the daf. Hakotev liishto din udvarim ein lebenichasayich. If a husband says to his wife, I don't want to have anything to do with your property, okay? I don't want to have, anything to do with it. We're going to see he doesn't exactly mean anything to do with it. Now, before we continue, there's 3 things we're talking now about nichsei melog, stuff that a woman inherits either while she's married, before she's married, and she brings into the marriage, or again, maybe during the marriage. And he has rights to the payroll, to the proceeds. He also inherits it in the event that she dies first, and she has no rights to sell it while they're married. So the question is, which rights is he giving up on? And the assumption is that since there's a lack of clarity here, we're going to assume it's the minimum. Okay, the Gemara is going to talk about this. Why are we assuming it's the minimum? And they're also going to say, why is the minimum going to be in the order that we talk about? We're going to see how this goes. So, he didn't mean he doesn't want, we assume anyway, that he didn't mean he doesn't want the fruits. He still eats the proceeds while she's alive. And if she dies, he inherits. So if so, so then what did he mean when he said, I don't want to have anything to do with it? For the one thing that if she sells it, she can sell, she owns the goof, right? The land itself. If she is to sell it, what he says is, I'm giving you rights to sell it. You can sell it if you want, even though theoretically you're not supposed to, but I'm giving up on my rights that you can sell it. So again, we're going to see in the Gemara why that's the first one that we're assuming it includes. Katavla, second case. He wrote to her, Dinu dvarim ein lebenichasayich, ubeperotehen. I don't have with your property and not with any of the perot, any of the proceeds. Harei ze eino ochel perot b'chayeha. Okay, he can't have perot. In this case, he gives up his rights to the proceeds. Only in meta yorsha. If she dies, then he'll inherit it. Then obviously he gets the proceeds, but not until she dies. And obviously she can't sell it. She can sell it, right? He does it. He's giving her the rights also to sell it. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yehuda says now, Le'olam ochel perei perot. Okay, there's perot, and then there's perei perot. Okay, the proceeds from the proceeds, we're going to have to see what that is in the Gemara. Unless he says the words, I don't want to have anything to do with your property, your fruit, your proceeds, and the proceeds of your proceeds forever. I have to talk later about the language here. Are all those absolutely necessary? And then he won't have rights to the proceeds of the proceeds. Otherwise, he won't have rights to the fruits, but he will have rights to the fruits of the fruits. Again, the proceeds of the proceeds. What about, back to the Mishna, not Rabbi Yehuda, we're back to the regular, everyone agrees with this. If he says, I don't want to have anything to do with your property, not your extra, right? Any of the proceeds of the proceeds. And he adds in your lifetime and in your death, then he's obviously including also the fact that I don't want to inherit this property. So, imeta ena yorsha. I skipped the words. Eno ochel pirot b'chayah. He doesn't eat the proceeds in her lifetime. And imeta, he doesn't, if she dies, he doesn't inherit. Rashbag Omer, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel comes along and says, what are you talking about? Imeta yirashena. He still inherits. Even though he says, I don't want to have anything to do with your property, even in your death, he still inherits. Why? Because he's making a condition against something it says in the Torah. According to Rashi says in Bava Batra, there's an opinion that says there's actually a machloket about it, and that's the machloket Tanakama Rashbag here. Tanakama says it's not written in the Torah, but Rashbag says it's written in the Torah that the husband inherits his wife. Where is that? In the laws of inheritance in Bamidbar, chapter 27, verse 11, it says your property goes lishe'ero hakarov elav mimishpachto, to your closest to kin relative, v'yarash ota, and he will inherit it. Now, the yarash ota is unnecessary because it already said the inheritance is going to go to your closest to kin. So the Gemara in Bava Batra says the yarash ota is unnecessary. What does it teach you? That he's yoresh ota. Ota is not what we were talking about, field or whatever it was, but the inheritance, it's talking about yarash ota. He's going to inherit the wife. And how do they get to the fact that ota is the wife? because it talked about she'er, and she'er is often a term, even though in that context of the simple reading of that pasuk, she'er means closest to kin, relative, but often your wife is called she'er in the Torah also. Therefore, it's a reference that he inherits from the wife. So Rashbag says this is Torah law. If it's Torah law, right, then he's basically making a condition against what it says in the Torah. He's saying, I don't want to inherit your property. When the Torah says you inherit the property. And anyone who makes a condition against what says in the Torah, the condition is not valid. We saw that there's a machloket about this, whether if it's financial, right? If it's mammon, maybe you could, and only isurim, maybe not. Anyway, he obviously holds, even when it comes to financial issues, you can't make a condition against what it says in the Torah. And Tanakama disagrees, probably thinking it's rabbinic in nature. Okay, now starting with the Gemara. Tani. So the first thing is, you probably didn't even notice, but the first words are hakotev. He writes it. He writes this down, and it's unclear exactly what he means. So, right, we have the rules, what language means what. Comes the Gemara and says, Tani Rabbi Chia, and Rabbi Chia's version of the Mishnah, it said, ha'omer li'ishto. Even just by saying it, it's the same halacha. Okay? It's no different if you write it or if you say it. Gemara asks, so what if he wrote this? Why should that work? In other words, why should this be effective? Doesn't it say in a braita? If we own a field together, and I say to you, I don't want to have anything to do with this field anymore. I'm sick and tired of it. It's causing me all these problems, or I'm fighting with you all the time. I don't want to be in this partnership with you. I have nothing to do with it. And my hands are taken away from it. Now, this is what we call lashon siluk. It's the same language used in the Mishnah. I don't want to have anything to do with this. That's not the same as lashon matana. I'm giving you my half. If I'm in a partnership with you and I don't want my half, I would say I'm giving you my portion. But if I said it in this language, I don't want to have anything to do with it. So we interpret that as saying, maybe you're just in a moment of anger and you're just frustrated and you don't want to get into this fight with me anymore. You don't want to be fighting. And you just say, I don't want to have anything to do with this. And maybe you don't really mean it. So the halacha is lo amar klum. So why is this any different? To which Amrei Debei Rabbi Yanai, cases aren't similar, because our case, even though we didn't know this before, it's when he writes it and they're only betrothed. It's before he gets it. It's not like he had the land and was frustrated with it or got frustrated with his wife. They weren't married yet. The land wasn't his yet for him to disown, so or get upset about. So when he says, I don't want to have to do with it, it's beforehand. And then we actually believe him that he obviously meant, right? He really doesn't want to have anything to do with this. Kid Rav Kahana, we're now going to bring two people that show this. Kid Rav Kahana, Dama Rav Kahana, Nachala Haba, Kilu, that highlight the same idea. Nachala Haba Adam Makom Achil, Adam Matnei Aleh Shelo Yirashena. If you see you're about to inherit something coming from somewhere else, right, like maybe through your wife, you can say, I don't want to have anything to do with this before it gets to you. That's fine. The whole idea that he gets her nichsei melog was a takana of the rabbis, because he's married to her, he has access to her property. That's all a takana of the rabbis. Now, if you want to say, Rava said, if you want to say, right, these two statements, Rav Kahana's statement about nachala that comes from somewhere else, you can make a condition. And Rava, who says, if you want to say, it's very nice the rabbis made this takana to help me, but I actually am not interested in that kind of help. I don't want it. Then we listen to them. So now this is a good example. Here's a takana chachamim. He has access to the nichsei melog. He could say, listen, I'm not interested. So that all supports what Rabbi Yanai said, which is he comes beforehand, before he gets it, and he says, listen, I'm not interested. Then we believe him, and then it's different from the partnership where they were already in business together. And then from here, right, so now first they want to say, Maiki gonzo. So what is this? When Rava said, if you say takana chachamim, I'm not interested in this, like this, what is the like this example? We're now on a side point. We've learned this many times, about this idea that the woman gets mizonot, food, in place of her salary. And that was a takana of the rabbis to make sure she gets food, in case she doesn't make enough money. But if she wants to say, listen, I don't want to give you my salary and I don't want you to feed me, she's allowed to. That's the takana chachamim that Rabbi uses as example to say, we listen to someone if they say, I know, normally the takana helps people. I'm not interested in that kind of help. But now the Gemara asks, if the man has the rights to say, I don't want takana chachamim, he should be able to do it once he's married also. Why? Only when she's betrothed to him. So Amar Abaye, Nisua yado ki yada. It's a way of saying it's kind of too late once you're married, because once you're married, it's not like something's going to be coming to him and he could say, I don't want it. As soon as it comes to her, it comes to him. So it's already there and he can't get rid of it. Because again, he becomes like the partner, where he's part of it already. It's his, because his hand is like her hand. Any of her possessions really go to him. Rava basically says the same thing, but in a bit of a different way. And the Gemara is going to say, what's the difference? Rava amal yado adifa miyada. His hand is actually stronger than hers, meaning it goes to him before it even really goes to her. Because she's married at that point, she doesn't really have a hand to accept property, so it kind of goes straight to him. And she accepts the Karen, but the principal, but he gets the proceeds. So now the Gemara says, nafkamina, what's the difference whether you say, and the nafkamina is not really going to be about this case. What's the difference if you say yado ki yada, they're equal, or they say his is greater? The nafkamina is the shomeret yabam. We've seen this before. Shomeret yabam is a woman who's waiting to do yibam. Now, she's not actually married to her husband, but she's supposed to marry him. Now, he is always going to be less than the husband, because the husband is actually married to her, and he is not necessarily not married to her, and he won't even necessarily marry her. So if you say yado ki yada, that they're equal, then the yabam is going to be one level below, and he will be less than the husband. So therefore, if she's a shomeret yabam, and something property falls to her, and he says, I don't want to have anything to do with your property, then actually will allow the siluk, because it's not his. But if we say the yad of a husband is greater than hers, and then the shomeret yabam drops down, and the yabam, his hand is equal to hers, then he won't be able to say, I don't want to have anything to do with this, because it'll be too late for him as well. There's actually some other interpretations of that line. I chose one interpretation to use. Now going back to the partnership case. So I can't just say, I don't want to have anything to do with this field. It doesn't mean anything. Unless I say I'm giving it to you as a gift. What if, what if we did a kinyan? I said, we're acquiring this. Okay, do an act of kinyan, pick up a handkerchief to show that I'm serious. Amar Rav Yosef, midinu dvarim kanu miyado. What do you mean? This doesn't work, because what he's basically saying is what I just said we're going to take it seriously. Now, what I just said means nothing, because we already said it's just in a moment of anger, or we don't believe, right? Saying, I don't have anything to do, that's called siluk, that's nothing. So it's like saying 0 times 5 is 0, right? It doesn't matter. You could do a kinyan, which is very nice, but you're doing a kinyan on nothing, on something that has no meaning, on siluk, on taking yourself out of something. That's not giving over something. Rav Nachman Amar, migufa shel karka kanu miyado. No, she actually acquires the land. So, I'm sorry, the other person, the partner, actually acquires the land, okay? Meaning it works. If you do a kinyan, then you show, I'm not just doing this in a moment of anger, I really mean it, and I'm giving you the land. So Amar Abai, Mistaber Milta de Rav Yosef, I think Rav Yosef makes sense, moving now to Amud Bet, be'orel. It makes sense to say like Rav Yosef that it doesn't work if when the next morning the shutaf goes to work in my part of the field and I say, what are you doing in my field? Then it becomes clear retroactively that clearly I didn't mean it. But aval ba'omed, but if he worked for 2 days, 1 or 2 days on my side of the field and I didn't say anything, then we assume my silence is showing. Again, this is all about trying to figure out what did I mean when I did a kinyan. It proves that it must be I was serious about it. Amar Amemar. So Amemar now says, so the halacha is, it actually works. You actually get the land. Amar le Rav Ashi la Amemar, be'orel o be'omed. Okay, so now they say, right, did he mean be'orel when I was arguing against him, meaning even if I argued against him, or only if I stood there and didn't say anything? L'may nafkamina, what's the difference? Well, we know what the difference is, l'cheder Rabbi Yosef, because of what Rabbi Yosef said. In other words, we want to know, do you hold it across the board, or do you hold like Rabbi Yosef, that it depends on the situation? Amar le, lo shmi'a le, klamar lo sfira le. I don't know, right? I never heard about this, meaning I don't know from Rabbi Yosef, so we're going to assume it's, in any case, it's koneh. Back to the Mishna. Im ken, right? The first line was, if he says, I don't want to have anything to do with your property, he still gets payroll, he still gets to inherit. To which the Mishna said, so then why did he say this, right? Then what was the point? And it's to say that any sale she does of the land will be valid. She can sell it. V'temale, mikol miles likat nafshay. Why don't we say, and this goes back to the basic thing of the Mishnah, which is, why doesn't it work for all 3 things? Amar Abaye, Ya bal shtar la tachtona. It's a very interesting principle. If you write a shtar and it's very ambiguous, so you're in the low point, meaning we don't believe you. You get the minimal interpretation of it. So it means we went minimal. Okay, but he must have been talking minimal. So why don't we take away his payroll? Because better for him to lose, right? If we're saying he was only going minimal, then it meant he was only giving her a little bit of rights. Better to give her the payroll than the ability to sell it. The ability to sell it is actually pretty big because that's the principle of it. So Amar Abaye butzina tav mikara. It's a term used in the Gemara a lot, which means he'd rather have short-term gains than long-term gains. Okay, so in the short term, he'd rather have the payroll, even though in the long run he'll maybe lose the land, but he'd rather have the payroll now. Okay, it means different ways of saying it. Either something that grows quickly is better, like a cucumber is better than a gourd because cucumber grows much quicker, or a small gourd before it grows really big. I'd rather pick it then than wait till it gets bigger, and who knows what will be. Maybe it'll get destroyed. Maybe the weather will ruin it. Maybe an animal will come eat it. So I'd rather not wait till it gets so big and eat it right now. So that's why he'd rather have the payroll and give up his rights to, give up her ability, basically allow her to sell the property. Another question, so maybe he should give up his option, maybe I'll inherit if she dies first. Amar Abaye, mita shchicha mechira lo shchicha. Again, we want to minimize. Death is common. In other words, 50-50 chance she's going to die first. But sale, it's not so likely she's going to sell her property. She wants it in the event that I die first. The husband dies first. So that's much less common. So therefore, again, if he's going to remove himself from something, right? If you're going to remove yourself from something, you're going to remove yourself from something that's less likely to happen. It's less likely she's actually going to sell it. Rav Ashi gives a different answer to this question, which is why doesn't it not cover all of them? Rav Ashi Amar, listen to the language. He said, your property meant the property itself, not when you die and I'll inherit, and not the proceeds. Going now to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda Omer la'olam ochel perei perot. So Tanu Rabbanit, the Braita says, Elu hem perot, ve'elu hem perei perot. What are perot and what are the proceeds of the proceeds? Hichnisa lo karka v'asta perot, harei hem perot. If she brought in land and it bore fruit, that's perot. Machar perot, if they sold those fruits, or whatever grew from there, any of the proceeds, v'lakach mehem karka, and they purchased new land with it, v'asta perot, and that produced proceeds, harei perei perot. That's proceeds. Now they ask a question. Rabbi Yehuda, perei perot dafka or dilma arolam dafka? What language does he mean was the more important one? He said a whole mumbo jumbo, right? You have to say perot, perotehen, arolam. So what if you just said perei perot? Is that enough to say, right? What he really means is perot, perotehen, and then if you took those proceeds and invested them more, and then. That's what he meant, perot, perotehen, forever, right? Meaning this keeps going on and on and on. If you keep taking the proceeds and investing them more, that's proceeds of proceeds. And all that, if he says those words, he's giving up on all that. So if you say perei perot dafka, it means you don't really need to say ad olam. Ad olam would then mean forever, meaning for the rest of my life, rather than forever, the perei perot having continued, right? The perei perot, the more perei perot, all that. Or is it ad olam dafka? Dilma ad olam dafka. Is it the ad olam means and keep going and going and going? If you just say perei perot, maybe you just meant just perei perot once, right? So you have perot, you invested those again. But if there's more proceeds, if you took the proceeds from the proceeds of the proceeds, right? You went one step farther, maybe then it would actually go to her. Okay, so which language is the more important? Or dilma travayu dafka, or maybe is it the combination of the two? So this is a bit of a convoluted line of argumentation. If you want to say it's really the perei perot that was imported, adolam lamali. Why did you need the words then? Adolam, forever. Hakamashmalan, kevan de katavla perei perot, keman de katavla adolam dam. What they wrote, why Rabbi Yehuda put in adolam there, was to say, when you say perot perotean, you mean and any proceeds of proceeds of proceeds of proceeds. That's what the adolam is there to say. It's like you said adolam, but not that you have to say it. If it's the adolam that's important, then you could have just said perot adolam, which means proceeds and then on, right? Any proceeds of proceeds and proceeds of proceeds. So in that case, perei perot lamali. Hakamash malan de apagav de katav la perei perot. Ikatav la adolam in ilolo. It's to teach you that even if you wrote perei perot, it wouldn't be enough unless you wrote adolam. If you just wrote perei perot, perot and perei perot, it would end there. Because you wrote adolam, that keeps it going forever. If you want to say you needed both those things to make it very clear that you not only mean perot perotehen, proceeds of the proceeds, but ad olam is to tell you, and then proceeds of proceeds of proceeds of proceeds forever, then tarte lamale, why really do you need both? So tzricha, katav la perei perot velo katav la ad olam, if you just had the proceeds of the proceeds, but you didn't say forever, hava amina perei perot delo achel, you would have thought, maybe it's just perei perot that you can't eat. Aval perei perot, aval perei de perei perot achil. You might have thought exactly what we said before, that maybe proceeds of proceeds of proceeds he could eat. Therefore, lahachi itzrich ad olam. That's why you needed ad olam. And if you wrote ad olam velo katav la perei perot, and you just said perot forever, hava amina, you would have thought lo lama perot kai. It just means you can't have the proceeds forever. Not that you can't have the proceeds of the proceeds. So, lahachi itzrich perei perot. That's why you needed both of them. Okay. Next question. Ibayelu. Katav ladinu dvarim ele b'nechasayich u'beperei perot, ma'u shiochal perot. If he says to her, now we're adding another thing. He says, I don't want to have anything to do with your property or your perei perot, but he skipped perot. He didn't say proceeds. He said the proceeds of your proceeds. Ma'u shiochal perot. Can he eat perot? Was he saying mi perei perot salik nafshi, but mi perei lo salik nafshi? He was only saying I won't eat proceeds of proceeds, but I will eat the proceeds. Or maybe he's removing himself from it, all of it. Pshita de mikol mile salik nafshi must be really perot also. Why? Diamar mi perei perot salik nafshi, mi perei lo salik nafshi. If you're going to say perot, he was saying I won't eat, but I will eat perot. Well, kevan da'achlinu leperot perei perot mehecha. If he eats the proceeds, that means he's going to eat all the proceeds and there'll be no proceeds left to further invest, which isn't really a great question. And you'll see why, because obviously he could leave over some. So that's a weird question. Anyway, we're going to reject it right now for that reason. They say, what are you talking about? That's a crazy rejection or explanation. You get the proceeds of the proceeds. If you gave away fruits, the proceeds, what did Rabbi Yehuda say? You still get the perei perot. Now, if you gave away the perot to her, she's eating the perot. That means there is no perei perot, right? That's what we're going to say right now. And she eats the fruits, the proceeds, perei perot mehecha, where they're going to be. It must be she leaves over some, and that's the ones he doesn't have access to, right? I'm sorry, he does have access to in the case where he didn't say perot perotean. Therefore, here also, if he only said perei perotean, I'll give you, and he has access to the perot, there could be still left over. He would eat the perot, but leave some over. And what he's saying is, if you invested that, I won't get that. Okay? In which case, we don't end up with an answer to this question. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, and here we're going to end in the middle of a section. So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel had said, even if he says, I'm not going to have anything to do with your property, even in your death, he still inherits her because it's now Ketubot Torah, and anyone who makes a stipulation against what the Torah says, it's not valid. So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer v'chulei Amarav halakha ke Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel v'lo mita'ameh. I hold like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel that it's not valid, his stipulation. He still inherits her, but not for the same reason. To which the Gemara tries to figure out what is the reason then. My halacha ke Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel v'lo mita'ameh. So why does he hold like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, but not for the same reason? Ilema, if you want to say, and this will be rejected, but only in tomorrow's daf, if you want to say halacha ke Rashbag da amare meta yirashena v'lav mita'ameh ilu Rashbag savar matnei ma shekatuv b'Torah t'na'o batel. Okay, because Rashbag holds, this is just repetitive, repeating what we learned in the Mishna. Anyone who goes against something it says in the Torah, the stipulation is canceled. But Rav savar t'na'o kayam, Rav disagrees and thinks, wait, we're talking about money here. You can stipulate a financial thing against what it says in the Torah. And then we have to explain, well, then why doesn't he think it's valid here? Well, he holds that the laws that a husband inherits his wife is only rabbinic. So what? Well, Chachamim asu chitzuk l'divreihem yoter mishal Torah. We've learned this many times. The rabbis always want to strengthen the Rabbanan law because people don't take it very seriously. So therefore, even though Rav thinks if you make a stipulation against what it says in the Torah, you don't have to keep it, but you can't make a stipulation against what the rabbis said. And that's why he thinks that it's not going to work here. And that's why you can't make a stipulation, because he views all the laws of inheritance of the husband, of the wife's nichsei melog, is rabbinic. And because of that, that's all. If you want to say this, however, we're going to reject it, and we'll get back to this in after the Chag. Wishing everybody a Shana Tova, Ktiva v'Chatima Tova.